So recently, this tiny little Hot Wheels sized car has been making the rounds on social media, especially following this year's Goodwood Festival of Speed, as this thing actually set the record for the fastest hill climb time, going even faster than the Volkswagen IDR.
Oh,
How, Sway?
Right, Kanye? How? How does a car that's the size of like an OG Mini Cooper not only get to be fast, but be record-breakingly fast? So let's start by asking this. Who the hell are McMurtry Automotive, and what the hell is this Photoshop-looking car? Well, to start, McMurtry Automotive is a British car company founded all the way back in 2016. Yeah, apparently they were only founded 7 years ago in the Cotswold in England. Not exactly known as the mecca of automotive manufacturing, but I digress. The company's first goal was a simple, tiny goal that honestly most automotive manufacturers tend to start out with. They aimed to make the absolute craziest vehicle ever made, and they didn't want it to be up to personal opinion. They wanted their car to absolutely smash every meaningful record in regards to track racing. So they got to work creating a car that would sacrifice absolutely nothing in reaching the goal of making a rip-your-face-off car. The initial concept took just 5 years to create, and in 2021, the McMurtry Spierling V1, sorry if I mispronounced that, although I don't really care, made its debut at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and when it debuted, no one really cared. See, the guys and gals at McMurtry were told to keep this project as secret as possible, and to their credit, they achieved that goal. And in fact, they did such a good job at it that, like I said, when this crazy thing made its debut, literally like no one cared. But the people there really had no clue what they were missing out on. Now, McMurtry has made several changes to the car since its debut 2 years ago, some very noticeable, others pretty subtle. So with the recent announcement that the Speirling will be coming into production, let's go over what exactly makes this thing so goddamn crazy. First and foremost, as cute and cuddly as this car looks, similar to DJ the Mighty Mouse, do not let this thing's size fool you, because to say it packs a punch is an understatement. The reason this thing is so small is because McMurtry wanted to make a car that was as light as physically possible, and that meant that it had to be as small as possible. Now, personally, when I first saw the size of this thing, my only thought was that this thing had to be massively unsafe, but actually I was wrong, as even though this thing is like the size of an ant, it's been made to satisfy most FIA crash safety standards, making it probably one of the safest cars you could honestly ever be in. With the small size comes other obvious benefits as well. With less car, this thing weighs nothing. The small size isn't the only thing contributing to this thing's feather lightweight though. It utilizes a carbon fiber monocoque, and just about every bit of the car that can be is carbon fiber. So just to review, this is a teeny tiny little car that is also made of some of the strongest and lightest materials that performance cars use. Well, that sounds like a recipe for a hyper light and rigid car, and that is obviously the case. The final production curb weight hasn't been released by McMurtry yet, but what is known is that it will be below 1,000 kilograms or 2,200 pounds for us Yankees, which in any car, regardless of horsepower, is crazy light. And we will touch on horsepower in a few quick moments, but first, a quick story. In the late 1970s, the Brabham F1 team showed up to the 1978 Swedish Grand Prix with a slightly new F1 car, as when it showed up, the car had a trash bin lid covering the rear bit of the car. This caused a stir, as other teams wanted to know why the hell an F1 team had a car that had a trash can lid shoved onto it. But they learned pretty quickly that it was covering up something pretty massive, not just in size, but in importance as well. The trash can lid was covering up a massive rear fan, and that fan wasn't just a radiator fan or used for some sort of cooling. The fan literally sucked air out from underneath the car, which massively increased downforce, and it essentially sucked the car down to the track and made it like the car was on rails. And in an era where aerodynamic downforce wasn't nearly as stressed as it is today, this car obviously dominated and went on to win the Grand Prix. Despite other teams screaming and kicking their feet in protest, the FIA, Formula One's governing body, deemed the car as being 100% legal and gave Brabham the green light to continue to race it. However, due to politics involving everyone's favorite uncontroversial F1 figurehead, Bernie Ecclestone, the car only raced in that Swedish Grand Prix and never raced in another Grand Prix again. Now, the reason I tell this story isn't just because it's a pretty cool story, it's because this McMurtry also has a fan. In fact, it actually has two fans, and these ones are adjustable. That means that you can adjust the fan speed to a certain RPM, up to 21,000 RPM, if I remember correct. And when they are at full RPM, they emit the same amount of sound as a jet engine. This fan acts in the same way as the previously mentioned Brabham F1 car, sucking out air from underneath the car, which creates a vacuum, sucking the car down to the ground. This is in and of itself impressive enough, but remember, it has this system while being as light as a feather and as small as a Hot Wheels car. All of those things help make this thing pull massive G's in the corners without breaking a sweat. Now, these things are impressive enough, but there is one more element about this car that makes it as insane as it is: its power. Now, the final element in what makes this car so crazy is its power plant. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't use some massive naturally aspirated V12 or something like that. This McMurtry does happen to be an EV, but unlike most EVs, I actually quite like this. It's right up there for me with other cool EVs like the Ioniq 5N and the Rimac Navara. The production horsepower was just dropped, and again, this little peanut of a car punches way above its weight class. Literally, this 1,000 kilogram car produces 1,000 horsepower thanks to a 60 kilowatt battery system. That battery powers 2 motors in the rear monocoque that power the rear wheels. And between the lightweight, those fans producing crazy amounts of downforce, and the slick rear tires, this will accelerate from 0 to 60 in an unfathomable 1.4 seconds. And the production model has a top speed of 190 miles an hour. The horsepower also helped make this thing literally the world's quickest car. Obviously not top speed wise, but acceleration wise. It'll reach 100 from a standstill in 2.63 seconds, 145 in 4.58 seconds, and do the standing quarter mile in 7.97 seconds. And it did that quarter mile while having a speed limiter of 150 miles per hour, which meant that for the final 3 seconds of its run, it was bouncing off the limiter, meaning that this could probably shave off up to half a second, making it even more insane. With speeds like that, other things are obviously in order to ensure this car can compete at such a high level. It utilizes full carbon fiber brakes on all 4 corners and a carbon fiber monocoque to help with chassis rigidity. The battery as well has been shaped around the car, as it takes a U shape which shapes itself around the carbon fiber tub that the driver slips into. Speaking of drivers, despite its small size, the cockpit of this car has been made in such a way that it can fit a driver up to 6 feet 6 inches and 330 pounds. In other words, it's tailored towards the American market. So why talk about this now? Well, recently McMurtry announced that it will be producing exactly 100 of these monsters for interested buyers. In addition to that awesome news, it's also making the rounds on social media as people are finally noticing the fact that not only is this not just some random concept car that will never see the light of day, but in reality, this is going to be one of the greatest cars of the 21st century, and I don't say that lightly. Personally, I think the greatest car of this century has to be the Shelby GT350/350R, but this McMurtry has to be a close second or third. It's just found ways to do things that even the greatest names in the automotive world still haven't been able to do. And somehow, this shop in a garage in the rural UK has not only managed to keep up with cars like the Koenigsegg 1.1 and the Bugatti Chiron, but absolutely smoke them in a ton of ways, and funnily enough, at a fraction of the price. Now, when I say fraction, don't think you or I will ever be able to even dream of affording one of these, as the starting asking price is around $1 million. And this isn't like you could justify daily driving this, as this will be a track-only hypercar. In addition to that, unless you're one of the current or former top-tier racing drivers in the world, like an F1 WRC or WEC driver, the odds of you being able to get even half of the potential out of this car is slim to none, as this car puts up video game hacker numbers. Like seriously, it's just ridiculous. But that doesn't mean you can't have fun with it.